So I recently had a conversation with Jana Spangler. She's a life coach and active member of the church who is very popular online. She makes appearances on podcasts like Faith Matters and Mormon Stories with John DeLynn and many others. Jana is iconic of a growing group in the church who take what they consider a more progressive approach to the faith.
And it's both. People see it both ways. There is no monolith of what it is to be a Latter-day Saint.
Well, and I would agree if you get down into the nitty-gritty, everyone has differences of belief. But we generally categorize people by at least you two both believed in God, right? You at least, could we say that, could you be a theist and not believe in God?
I don't think that would, by definition, work very well.
Well, then what is the definition of a Latter-day Saint? Like,
I think that's a good question. And who gets to decide it, right? Because I do know people who are like me, pioneer ancestry. Like, it is so deeply in me that if I decided to leave the church one day, I can totally see myself saying, no, I'm ethnically a Latter-day Saint. Like, this is my identity. This is how I was raised from the time I was born. There is something so in me.
See, but that isn't
what that tradition is.
To erase the definition. That's just to say that the definition of a Latter-day Saint is to have an ethnic identity that you have, that you care about. And it alters the meaning of what a Latter-day Saint is from a person who has entered into a certain kind of covenant relationship with God and are striving to keep that covenant into someone who merely has a particular ethnic identity.
It can be, or it could mean for you, it means a whole lot more. And we won't know what that is for somebody unless we ask, unless we actually get to know one another. And when does that matter? Maybe it matters if you're reading a book they wrote. Maybe it matters if you're going to hear them speak, or if you're going to a retreat that they're putting on, or that you're listening to a podcast like this. That's where it matters. I don't know that it matters other than that. Why do I need to know what my neighbor across the street, if they are believing all the things in all the right ways? I'm uninterested in that. And I frankly believe that Joseph and Jesus would be as well. But that's just my view. Unless I'm engaging them in some meaningful way that I need to know that, it doesn't matter. Why do I care?
Well, I would say just so that we know what we're talking about, for clarity's sake.
Sure.
Then like you can, like, why can't a person say, yeah, I'm not a Latter-day Saint, I don't believe anymore?
They can.
Well, what I'm saying is, like, isn't that the more honest thing to do? Doesn't that create more clarity? Because the idea is to avoid confusion. Like, the point of language is to convey ideas that we have to other people.
And some language doesn't do that with just a word. Sometimes we have to get to know people to understand what they mean by it. That's how language is. Not every piece of language can be defined to that level. So how is it dangerous? I just really want to understand what's dangerous about it.
So we have these words, and then there are different notions that people have.
Sure.
And that's fine. You know, people can have whatever notion that they want attached to a particular word. And we might ask the question, well, which notion that a person has about a given word, like Latter-day Saint, is right? And that all comes down to, like, by what standard are we judging this word, right? So for instance, if I say that I'm an African-American, we would use the standard of my biology to determine if I actually am an African-American or not, right?
Sure.
We can see if it aligns with a particular standard. In other words, the straight line is the line that represents the, African-American heritage, biology, genetics. And then, you can see that mine doesn't align with that. It's not justified. The definition that I have given doesn't accord to a particular standard, right? And so the question becomes, with these notions, like to be a Latter-day Saint, to be a Catholic, like, what is the line that we're using to determine if something aligns with that category or not? And this isn't just I'm using the example of Latter-day Saint or Catholic, like these religious categories. We use the same thing for, like, if someone says that they're a woman, right? Like, how could you tell if that person was actually a woman or not? How would we know if they were correct or not? Right? If it has to align with something. So what is that thing if someone claims to be a woman? Like, what is it that determines if someone is a woman or is not a woman?
Yeah. I mean, this is a debate that's happening in our society right now, and there are people who want to put some really strict boundaries around that, and there are people who fall outside of that, and I see a lot of harm in their lives when someone is trying to put something on them that does not align with what they feel.
If you endorse certain positions that run contrary to the church, can a person just say, oh, well, that's what my profession, that's kind of the standards of my profession is to do that?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's a question, right? This is a big ethical question. What if you're a physician and your particular skill set is dealing with gender affirming surgeries of some sort? You're going to be in an ethical pickle that you have to work
you
out
would,
within yourselves.
and so like performing a mastectomy on perfectly healthy breasts for a Latter-day Saint physician who would feel that is immoral or wrong, or maybe doesn't and agrees with it and thinks that it's good, but the church has a position against that. Doesn't a Latter-day Saint ultimately isn't part of what they're doing in their covenants is that there's no higher authority than God and his church and his mouthpieces?
It's just a messy world out there, Jacob, and people who are in that position have to make the right decisions for themselves.
But
and it does happen. It really happens in a lot of therapy, because people it is a tenet of therapy that you cannot lay your reality on somebody else. That is malpractice. That is malpractice. So
well, then I mean, the early martyrs were willing to die rather than even say that they weren't Christians. And now the modern Christian is unwilling to lock horns with their professional colleagues because
why are the martyrs the standard? Who says this is the way that we should be? Like when we go to the
temple, don't we make that covenant?
If we have
at least for covenant temple Latter-day Saints, certainly we pledge to give our lives if necessary for God and his kingdom.
Yeah.
And so isn't that the expectation? That we're willing to sacrifice anything necessary to obey God, that no sacrifice is too much?
And I think we have to work out what that means for us. Like we have to wrestle the angel, like Jacob. If we are perfectly given lines of exactly how to be a Latter-day Saint, and if you're doing it right, this is the way you're doing it. That does not require the kind of soul wrestle that it requires to transform ourselves into a new creature. I mean, I remember years ago, this was before my faith got complicated. I was a gospel doctrine teacher, and we came across a certain part of the New Testament and talking about the Pharisees and other things in the lesson manual. And I just remember it occurred to me how grateful I was that I don't have all of those rules. That if you take something like keeping the Sabbath day holy, that there's a wide range of what that means for people. I know at the time I wasn't a runner. I knew a mission president who ran every Sunday. Like that was his spiritual practice. That is where he got to be alone. He got to be in his body, there with God. And for me at that time, that sounds like the last thing that would bring me close to God. I would be cursing. But often as Latter-day Saints, what we have, and I think this is human, right? I think this is the story in the New Testament a lot, is we want to have the boundaries. We want to make it easy. We want to know. And we imagine if I'm doing the most strict interpretation, if I'm staying in my church clothes all day, if I am allowing no media in except for church-centered things, then that must be the righteous way. And we can do that all in our head without ever having a conversation with God. To me, I'm grateful that these boundaries are not so defined as what you're trying to make them, Jacob, because to me, I want to wrestle with God. I want to know what God wants of me. I think personal revelation is really important to a healthy, mature spiritual life, because not because I get to do whatever I want, but because I need to know what my particular covenants are with God. I need the freedom to make those with God in the way that I live my life. And I am not qualified to tell you what they should be for you. I'm not qualified to tell you whether taking a run on a Sunday would bring you closer to God or not.
But would you say that God has authorized certain servants on earth to dictate the terms of his covenants that he's going to have us make? Because my understanding is that covenants are something that God, through his servants, allows us to sign on to on his terms, not something that we individually negotiate on our own terms.
I see that differently, Jacob. I think that we try to reduce personal revelation to a confirmation tool, or to maybe a liahona and a decision of what is going to be best for us in the future. I read, I don't know how long ago, a survey that was done on BYU campus of Gen Z people, and a full quarter of them did not identify as straight, cisgendered people.
Yeah, I'm aware of the
That's
study.
a tidal wave coming at the church. And we are not saying, we're not inviting them out of the church, except for by their behavior, obviously, or if they marry. But that boundary maintenance is going to become more and more and more of an issue for us. It is. And
I don't think we change our doctrine, and what's true doesn't change because it's really unpopular, and because a lot of people.
I don't think we should change things to be popular. I agree with you 100%. It's not about being popular. It's about understanding another person's life. That's a different thing, because this is what I believe. This is how I make sense of it, Jacob, is that I have not seen evidence that a prophet, any prophet, I don't see a mechanism where God comes to them and tells them something that goes against what their culture has dictated that they already believe. I don't believe that God comes and dictates word for word what a prophet should be saying. That is not how I understand mystical experience. This is one of the things that I gained in my 2 years understanding mystical experience. That's not the way it works. It's not like we talk about Joseph Smith's first vision as if it was a visitation. It was a vision. It's not so concrete as we believe. That's what I believe. I believe that mystical experience is much different than that.
Is that the way that Joseph described it?
Well, Joseph described it a lot of different ways, and it got more concrete over time. At first, he kind of talked about it as being an experience where he felt the remission of his sins and met the Lord. So, but he always called it a vision and never called it a visitation. Why don't we call it the visitation? It was a vision. I think we concretize things and we get rigid. So,
for the full episode, check out the link in the description. So, do you enjoy the content here on Thoughtful Faith? If so, be sure to hit the notification bell. This ensures that our new videos show up on your feed. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group called Thoughtful Saints, where myself and others discuss the sorts of topics found on this channel. And lastly, if you think other people would benefit from this video, please be sure to share it.